Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide.
Hi, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Welcome to our 300th. I can't get over it.
Love it.
300th episode of this podcast, which we never thought would be a thing, just so you know. We are as surprised as anybody else that we are still here more than 6 years and 300 episodes later. When we started this, we looked at each other and said, casting's kind of a new trendy thing. And at the time, I was writing a blog, which I could potentially go back to doing, but I had been blogging for a long time. And we were sort of like, podcasting is kind of a new thing. When my children had said, no, Mom, you need to be podcasting. And Allison, you had heard some things about podcasting.
Podcasting was on my radar until you mentioned it.
Oh,
because
maybe.
my thing was, I remember we met at a restaurant. I was like, I have this idea that I want to do like webinars. I mean, this is how old I want to do webinars. Teach teachers how to be better teachers. That was the whole thing. You were like, that's a great idea, but there's something about it didn't sit right, because webinars is kind of like an old thing, I think.
I still do webinars, but it's not the right kind of venue, I thought. It wasn't the right outlet.
You came back and said, let's do a podcast. And I was like, I have no idea what that even is.
I had been listening to some podcasts at that point, and my sons were like, you need to be doing a podcast. That's where the people are. And I do believe in going to where the people are. And so we just were like, okay, this would be a kind of fun thing to do together. Let's do this. We'll probably do it for maybe 6 months to a year, and then we'll run out of topics.
Or nobody will listen. I think that was
that was another thing. Nobody's going to listen. Nobody's going to care.
Yeah.
And nobody will come. And so we're just going to randomly do this thing.
Close up shop when it doesn't succeed. I think that's what we were like.
Which just goes to show how very wrong we can be.
Yes.
This has been just one of the most unbelievable experiences in so many ways. Our statistics show that we reach people internationally through this podcast. Our numbers are always good. I get on professional development now to facilitate those sessions. There's almost always somebody who's like, wait a minute, are you the podcast person? Or, oh my God, I love your podcast. Like, it's amazing to me. But I think the most amazing thing is that this is the 300th episode. So it's like nearly the 300th topic. We've had some holidays where we repeated topics, but it is nearly the 300th topic and still going. We still have a list for the future, which taught us some things about early education. I think it taught me that there's just endless things to talk about when it comes to educating young children. And it made me even more against that notion that people who are working with young children are babysitting, because look at how much we've had to discuss.
It's so multifaceted and detailed, and like, there's just so much that goes into it that to say to somebody, oh, it's just babysitting is incredibly wrong. It's amazing to me that people even think that. But anyway.
But I mean, we had all these topics.
It's amazing,
right?
The topics that we come up with.
We really, we just sort of we text each other, so that, we text each other all the time, but the topics don't always come from us. Yes. And I've had people say to me, I was listening to your podcast, or I was binging, which still makes me laugh.
The binging, I love.
I love it. It still makes me laugh that people binge us, because I feel a little like, Netflix or a streaming service.
And I feel like when you start from the beginning, you'll see how far we've come.
It's been an interesting journey, I think, in part because part of the journey of this podcast was going through an entire pandemic. We started before the pandemic, and then had to travel this through a pandemic. So when we first started, as you may recall from a minute ago, we thought this is going to be a small, tiny thing that we're just going to kind of do and see what happens. And it's going to end up being nothing. And so we started just sort of like, we're just going to record from whatever software we can find from home. We've continued to do that because people have told us that they appreciate that we're just sort of real people doing our real thing. But that there were a lot of challenges with that during the pandemic, because just like every other human being, we were locked down and services were closed. And so we were kind of stuck with our pets. And then we got all kinds of nasty reviews. Like, you should lock yourself in a closet with no air. And
how dare your dog be barking in the background?
We were just like, okay, listen, too. Right? Like this is where I live. I'm doing my best to bring the information to you. And so one of the things I learned is that, people can be very I'm looking for a word, unforgiving, misunderstanding, something.
Yes, misunderstanding.
Like we're doing the best we can. And I just want to put out that even though right now we're not in that situation anymore, we're still just doing the best we can. And we continue to offer you unedited Cindy and Alison.
Unedited, I think is key.
Unedited, because I feel like people appreciate that it's us having a conversation.
And we're real people.
We are very real
people.
Very real. If you go to YouTube and you watch some of our videos, you're going to see how very real. There are things that happen during our videos that if you're listening, you don't always know have happened. And especially those episodes where Allison and I will shift position a little, and then I don't quite know where to look, or we're looking over at notes, or there are just things.
I know there's some with my dog popping in the corner there.
Yeah.
when we were locked down.
When we were locked down.
He's there.
And I know some people are thinking now the lockdown didn't last as long. Well, folks, the doggy daycares were not operating as they are now. And there was just, I can record now in a spare room that used to be occupied by my child.
Yeah.
Like I hope that people understand. So, people sometimes do ask, I was getting back to what I was saying before. People sometimes do ask what inspires these episodes, because they'll say, I've binged, you have 200 something episodes, now 300 something episodes. Like, what has given you so much fodder? And we do want to share that with you because you're part of that. If you're listening, if you're one of our preschool peeps, you are absolutely part of that fodder. We hear from people all the time. And we love that.
It's one of my favorite parts.
I know.
It is my favorite part when we get an email or a message listening to what you guys are going through in the field. It might be different than what I'm going through, might be different than what Cindy's going through. So that is amazing that you want to come to us for that advice. And you guys have such brilliant ideas that we didn't even think of, that have turned into wonderful episodes, So I think it's good to mention that, because they are a huge part of it. Because first off, they listened, and if they didn't listen, we would not be here. Yeah. But then we also listen to you. We try to make it about what you are interested in learning about too.
I recently looked up where we're ranking in the recommended early childhood education podcasts. We are currently sitting at number 3. We're always 1, 2, or 3. We have been for years and years, and we have you to thank for that. It's inspirational to us to even find topics to know you're out there, but we would love to hear from you. And, you can just go to howpreschoolteachersdoit.com and send some encouragement, send an idea, send a question, whatever you'd like to do, because that has inspired quite a number of the episodes. So, please consider contacting us in some way and being that inspiration. And as you know, if you are a consistent listener, we will be happy to give you credit for what you inspired.
I love a good shout out.
Me too. Me too. For a while there, we were shouting out different countries and states in the United States that our podcast was being listened in. And then we stopped because we felt like it was becoming very repetitive. But I would like to suggest, Allison, that going forward, we start doing it again, because there are different statistics. People are listening maybe in other places. So we are going to, with our next episode, I think, resume this whole let's shout you out. So get people where you are listening, and maybe you'll hear your country, your state, even maybe your city, if it's the state is on the top, in the tops all the time. So please do come to that. So we get inspiration from you all the time in a variety of ways, and we thank you for that. And we hope that you will do something for us. We're going to ask a favor before we go on to what are some of the other inspirations.
Yeah.
Please go to wherever you're listening to this podcast. For example, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are, iHeartRadio, wherever you are, if you have the ability to write for us there a review and give us a star rating, won't you please go and give us the 5 stars and write something nice if you're enjoying this? Because there are people, like we said, who, one of the things I told Allison when we started this, by the way, I already had a published book. I was already doing things in the public. And I said to Allison, okay, let's do this, but I'm going to give you one really important piece of advice that someone gave me. And that's don't read the reviews because it'll kill your spirit.
Yeah.
And when you're doing this sort of public work, if you already do this sort of work, here's what you need to know, folks. If you believe I'm doing the best job you can, right? I believe that I'm doing the best that I can in the moment. Allison is always doing the best she can in the moment. Then that's all we need to know. And if you go and you read all the negativity that people like to spew, it's just not motivating. It doesn't motivate at all. And it's mostly non-productive feedback. Like there's things we can't do I can't change something that happened with the sound in a prior episode. Like I can't, we're always trying to do our best. So at any rate, while I myself might not read it, it really helps us out to have you write positive reviews. So please do that. It just makes us,
that would help other people to find us.
It does.
Need us. Yes.
It helps other people find us. So please do that. There are other things though that inspire, and we thought it would be good for you to know that too, because many of you are working in the field, or maybe you're raising young children, and maybe this can be inspirational to you too. It is not only inspiration for us, it could be inspiration for you. Some episodes are inspired by time that I spend in various early childhood programs. I will see like really good practices. They thought I was going to say bad, but you're wrong. I will see really good practices and think, okay, how do we teach this to other people who are doing these other things that maybe they should think about doing it this way? Because I saw something really great. Yeah. Right.
Even I have gotten ideas from some of the things that she's come back with where I was like, I'm doing that in my room, and I do, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. I get to see, I have like a wide lens because I go and I do verification visits for the CDA credential. So I go to many programs. I also provide educational consulting services. So I see and interact with many programs and public schools. So I have this big viewpoint that I like to bring to people. And also, if we'll just stick with me for a second and then we'll go to you. I spend a lot of time interacting with current and future professionals, current professionals who want to get their CDA, because I also teach those courses. And I teach college courses, which are a combination of people who are new to the field and been in the field, and they share experiences. So I never share anything on the podcast where I don't ask permission, but sometimes they will say things and I'll be like, listen, I have a podcast and I think that's brilliant and I would like to share it. Is that okay with you? We always ask if we can share people's names and locations. And there are people who say, no, please don't share, but you're welcome to teach about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just know that a lot of the ideas have come from my interactions with all of you, the workforce and students and people who want to learn.
Yeah.
So I'm pointing, right. Yeah, supposed to be pointing on YouTube because that's where we're at on our list that we made.
Some of the episode ideas come from my work, which is a little different than Cindy's work, whereas I'm in the public school right now in a setting with the same group of children all year round, just like you guys, a lot of you guys are. And so some of the inspiration comes from either my time with those children or my time with coworkers too, who might have different ideas or different topic ideas or different things that they are doing, as well as like my interactions with some of the parents and families that I work with. And some of it's just observation, where you're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how I could talk about this in a podcast, because sometimes, especially with families, they'll come to me with questions that I answer to that family, but it would be beneficial for everyone to know this information, so that I kind of do that. I also, because I'm in the field, just also doing PD sessions that sometimes you're like, that's a great PD. And others you're like, what was that? And I'm just saying, like, you're gonna believe what they just taught us to do.
I do the same thing. I'm always learning. You can ask me any day of the year, what are you enrolled in and what are you learning about? And I could tell you.
Yeah.
And I do also attend professional development trainings, train the trainer things, all sorts of courses being offered about many different things that relate to learning, period.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I also will contact Alison and say, I learned this amazing thing, or what on earth were these facilitators talking about?
What's happening here? And why are we still, some of the stuff I sat in, especially the last like year or two, was like outdated stuff that you're like, why is this still happening in early ed? Right.
Correct.
So I think that is something that needs to be addressed on our podcast, because just because a facilitator is telling you this information doesn't necessarily make it right. Or
I mean,
I don't know, like,
maybe,
or it's good to question. I don't think it's bad to question
facilitators. I'm a facilitator of professional development. We don't know what we don't know. And I have facilitated professional development, and I've had participants tell me things that they've done that are brilliant. And I always say to them, thank you so much. I think I'm going to share that in the future, because I learn as much as the participants when I facilitate professional development. We all have different experiences, so that helps me to learn and bring it to other people. So but then there are also those other moments, I think when you attend professional development, you have to go in with an open mind. You have to know that you don't know everything there is to know. None of us do.
Right.
You have to be willing to learn new things, and you have to be willing to let go of some of the old when you realize a new thing is better. True. There are moments, however, where I'm like, why are we teaching this thing from 40 years ago? That's not how we do it anymore.
Yes. Okay.
We also, Alison and I consistently see things on TV that inspire episodes. We read articles, we read books, we're watching things on TV. I recently watched something that you recommended to me that I'm going to mention here. I'm going to give it a shout out. I watched the documentary about reading Rainbow.
It was amazing.
It was so good. First of all,
it was amazing.
First of all, to have LeVar Burton reading me a book again was worth the price of admission.
Like, they talked about, like, just how the act of talking about reading was so beneficial to children back then, and they don't have that anymore. It inspired an entire episode.
It did. It inspired an episode. It was well on done. Was it on Netflix? It was on Netflix. Okay. Yeah. So everybody go to Netflix and search the Reading Rainbow documentary. I think
it's called like Way Up in the a Butterfly in the Sky.
Butterfly in the Sky, because that was their theme song.
Yes. And they talk about how they came up with the themes. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's very good.
Watch it.
It's very good. I think one of the most significant parts was the reason the series ended. So please stick with the documentary. Yeah. And I'm not going to tell you what that is. So you go and you watch. Yeah. It's things like that we as early childhood professionals can find very inspiring. And so we are inspired. We bring it, but you also can be very inspired by this documentary.
I just want to say about the whole TV inspiration thing is sometimes, like, Reading Rainbow, that documentary was definitely about education, but there's sometimes that Cynthia and I are just watching something that has nothing to do with education at all. And we're like, wow, that's a really good quote, or that's a really interesting spin on life. And we turn it into an episode. So, like, sometimes the inspiration just comes from very strange things that you wouldn't think are educational. I could be watching. You watch a lot of like court TV.
I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna say I not all the time, but I get caught up in these trials and court TV, and I'll text Alison and be like, listen, something must have happened in this person's childhood. Could we make an episode out of this? Because here's how it ended up on court TV.
Yeah. Or like quotes from prosecutors have been on our episodes. I mean, it's just stuff that pops up. Like, I watch a lot of sports. So sometimes I'll be like, you're not going to believe what they just said about this guy who was raised in Dallas. And and it's just,
or even things like watching the Olympics.
Oh, we don't
what goes on.
Olympics.
We did in the past. Okay. Yeah. But I'm anyway, you can see
soon. Yeah.
You can see how, how this. And so I hope when you who are working and raising young children are doing things like watching whatever on television, reading books, that you're always thinking of it, or sometimes thinking of it through the lens of, what is this telling me about children and childhood and what we can do better? Yeah. We also, by the way, in full disclosure, are sometimes inspired by things our families say.
Or do, or don't do, or
did or didn't do. didn't do or did poorly or did well or whatever. But we often look at things that our families say and our own early childhoods. And I think if we all spent some time, sometimes with a therapist, looking back at our early childhoods, that is fodder enough to know what can be done better with young children. And I'm not saying that everything is terrible. What I'm saying is no human being is perfect. We all do things with children that are questionable, and that sometimes we do things in the moment that we're highly emotionally charged. And when we look back at our childhoods, we're able to see that and think, okay, maybe we can teach people in the future, or maybe in the future I can do XYZ a little differently.
Right. And then maybe they won't be in therapy as much as we
maybe they won't be in therapy. I don't know, but
no, who knows?
I'm just going to say, don't go it alone if you need a therapist.
It goes back to like, we're all just doing the best that we can with what we have. And the parenting is the same way, right? You're doing the best you can in the moment.
I think to conclude this episode, my experience through 300 episodes and all is that there's always curiosity and wonder when it has to do with young children, which I think is a beautiful thing. And I hope that you all take time when you're with young children to stop talking, sit back, and dive into that place of wonder that these children live in. Right? When you're talking with families, if you're a professional and you're talking with families, really think about what does this family prioritize? It could be different than what I would prioritize, and that's okay. Learn about the cultures and the beliefs of other people. And I always feel like as long as no one is going to get harmed, then whatever people do is okay. So learn about it. And we're so lucky in this profession to be around so much inspiration all the time. I was doing a CDA visit last week, and it was a terrific program that I was in. And I was just watching, as I was required to do, but thoroughly enjoying watching a room of infants with their caregivers who were so wonderful with them. And I thought how lucky these children are, but also how lucky these caregivers are to have so much inspiration about them all the time. So, folks, we hope that you continue past this 300th episode. Stick with us, continue to recommend us, and keep us in those top ratings. We appreciate you more than you will know.
Yeah, we definitely do.
Thank you so much.
Bye, peeps.